This is a Vietnamese word, not Chinese, and probably everyone you know can't even bloody read it. For most 1,000 years, Vietnamese people wrote this script. This is called Chũ Nôm. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Oh gosh. And today, the most estimated people that can read this script fluently, Chũ Nôm, is to be around 100 people. That's very few. But I have to be honest here, this is a rough estimate from a preservation foundation that is decades old. It is just a figure, not a head count. Gosh. Today I want to talk about Chũ Nôm and how it carried 1,000 years of writing and can now be read fewer by people that could fill out a lecture hall. We'll be talking about how it was used, the history of Chũ Nôm, and how it was eventually phased out by the current modern day Vietnamese script, Ngoc Ngữ. For roughly 1,000 years, the language of power in Vietnam wasn't even Vietnamese. It was classical Chinese in what the Vietnamese called Chữ Hán. Court documents, civil service exams, law, poetry, medicine, all of it written in a language that you had to be schooled in the same way that medieval Europe ran on Latin. If you wanted to be taken seriously, you would have to have written in the northern classical language. But here is the crack in that system. Chinese characters were built for Chinese words. And Vietnamese is full of words that Chinese simply doesn't have. Everyday native spoken Vietnamese words, the name of a village, the name of a rice paddy, the way an actual person actually talks. So how do you write those down? Well, that's the problem. And Chũ Nôm is the 1,000-year answer. Now, Nôm isn't a separate alphabet. It is built on top of Chinese characters, hijacks them, and it does it in a few distinct ways. Stay with me on this one because this is the clever part. For Vietnamese words already borrowed from Chinese, and there are thousands of those, you just use the original Chinese character. Easy, right? Take a Chinese character and borrow it for its sound, and then just ignore for what it actually means. A bit like writing an English word, using a totally unrelated symbol, just because it sounds right. Borrow a character for its meaning, but read it out loud as a native Vietnamese word instead of the Chinese one, and then move that makes Nôm its genuine own invention. Vietnamese scribes would weld two new characters into a new character that simply didn't exist in Chinese. One piece hinting at the meaning and another piece hinting at the sound. Meaning plus sound fused into a single glyph. You will not find in any Chinese dictionary. Take the word we start with, Chũ, meaning writing itself. One half of it means word or character. That other half is just there to point out the sound. That is Nôm inventing itself, right there in one character. I should say, scholars actually split these methods into 4 to 7 categories, and argue about where the lines are. So what I've just given you is the clean, simplified version. To read this system, you had to first have mastered all of written Chinese, and then everything Vietnamese had laid on top of it. It was by design hard. Despite that, or because of it, Nôm became home of Vietnam's greatest literature, the tale of Kieu, Nguyen Du's epic, or Nguyen Du's epic. I'm not too sure. I'm pretty sure it's Nguyen Du's epic? The fierce, the funny, gloriously double-edged poetry of Hua Xuang Huang. Please, I am so sorry if I get any of these pronunciations wrong, man. I'm still learning my Vietnamese, and let me tell ya, it's difficult. Nguyen Chai's 15th century collection, some of the earliest Nôm verses that we still have. This is not some footnote script, this is the crown jewels. But Chũ Nôm had 3 problems it could never escape. 1. Nobody ever standardized it. The same word could be written in several different ways, depending on the writer, the region, and even the century. Even the word Chũ has several different forms. For almost its entire life, it was never an official script. The court kept running on classical Chinese. These are real exceptions. The brief He dynasty around the year 1400 made Nôm official and even had the classics translated into it. And the Daesun rulers used it for administration during the 1700s. But those were short windows and both got reversed. The establishment often actively distrusted it. Nôm carried popular, vernacular, and even rebellious writing, and it was banned as subversive more than once during the 16 and 1700s. There was even an old put-down aimed at the vernacular. Rough sense in that common speech was rude and low class. The prestige had always lived up north in Chinese. So Num had stayed locked away to a tiny literary elite. Realistically, only a few percent of the population could even read the Chinese it was built on. A national literature that almost nobody in the country could even read. Then came the replacement, mostly from missionaries in the 16th centuries, Europeans, mostly Portuguese. Jesuit missionaries started writing Vietnamese in the Latin alphabet, with extra marks added for the tones. That became Woc Ngữ, the national script of Vietnam today. Now, you will often hear this is entirely pinned on one Frenchman, Alexandre de Rhodes, because of a famous dictionary he had published in 1651. And it's worth being honest here. De Rhodes compiled and had popularized that system. He didn't invent it alone. He was building on Portuguese missionaries, like Francisco de Pino, who had came before him. The single hero version is tidy, but it's just also not quite true. For a long time, these two systems had simply coexisted. So what had actually killed Num wasn't the alphabet on its own. It was policy under French colonial rule. The Latin script was pushed hard through the schools, and the old Chinese-based examination system that Num had quietly depended on was dismantled. The very last imperial-held exam was in 1919. Pull that foundation out entirely, and Num goes with it. Within a couple of generations, a script that had carried 1,000 years of writing simply could not be read anymore. And that's the part that sits with me the most. It's the fact that it's not a dead language. I mean, Vietnamese is being spoken by over 100 million people today. It's just that the writing system is no longer being used. I mean, there are active efforts now to keep the old Chũ Nôm writing system alive, which is absolutely fantastic. Anyways, this was the quick history of Chũ Nôm. I tried to briefly summarize as much as I can. I wish I could have gone more into detail with the characters and stuff like that. But anyways, this is the first video on my channel. I hope you guys enjoy it. I really want to do Khmer next, Japan, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, and all that cool stuff, and maybe do some cool history videos while I'm doing it along with that as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and make sure you leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.